Another word of caution about some traditional methods of assisting motion, in particular pulleys and or rigid bars. Each requires the act of gripping. When we create a grip, it doesn't look like it would be a consequence, but what it requires is sufficiency of your shoulder joint to support that act of gripping. And so to demonstrate this, you can try it with your own arm to feel the concern that I want to share with you. So if you'd use your non-involved arm and simply elevate your arm and just feel the effort that is required to elevate your arm. Just do that a couple of times. And then in flight, start to close your hand into a grip. And as soon as you start to close your hand, you start to feel that your shoulder almost feels like it's working against you. And what that is it's an activation of the shoulder muscles to combine the movement of elevating with gripping. Well, if a person's shoulder is insufficient because of a history of pain or a repair of the rotator cuff, as we ask them to grip and simultaneously elevate their arm, we're really asking them to work beyond their capacity. And what that does in turn is it recruits the substitutions that we've been attempting to resolve all along. So as we get further along and we can actually elevate our arms, we don't want to put a deterrent of their progress. And so the active pulleys, while they look like they're harmless enough, the simple act of gripping creates that demand that I or you actually experienced, and therefore we're taking one step forward or two steps forward and one step back. It's counterproductive. We also don't live confined to pulleys or to something we grip. And so you really have limits in what you can do for motion, because it's essentially an arc of motion, but you're limiting the rest of your body from participating. Even worse would be a rigid bar like a broom or a golf club, or in this case a cane. You can still assist the motion, but it's really rigid. So there's no dynamic support with such a rigid apparatus. And again, the complications with gripping. So a strong deterrent to that. And then finally, the act of table slides. And so the intent is to think as if a person can't elevate their arm or can't hold their arm up to reach, is that you would just have them slide across a table. But inherently, as we try to overcome the friction of the towel on the table, we're naturally going to hike the shoulder. I'll show you with this arm. And so as we reach forward, we can't help but start to reach or elevate a little bit, and then overcoming the friction, we're just likely to bind that shoulder. So again, it doesn't have the dynamic capacity. Now in some cases, people will progress that towel slide into elevation and just sliding up a table or a wall. And the limit of that is I can't articulate my arm naturally like we would with natural motion. So you're somewhat stuck to the wall, which is binding of the shoulder. And so the alternative for those higher levels of elevation is the UE Ranger with either the wall mount in a clinic or the door mount at home. And so this, with the arc of motion that it provides up and over, is the act of elevation. So I can very methodically grade the application or grade the progression of motor activity that's in the act of reaching by the natural support and then the variability of the support. And so I'm just capable of promoting freedoms of movement, at the same time recruiting the proper motor control. And then this apparatus just wraps around the entire door and elevates, so I can be progressive in that nature. But you can see how I can combine movement. If I'm working on external rotation, at the same time I want to blend it into reaching. It allows It allows that progression on the fly, which is natural. And then coming out of your exercise, then you could just do a natural cool down, but you have then a warm up, a challenge, and a cool down, and that just helps to make that cycle of the nervous system grading its strength recovery as well as endurance recovery, and finally to restoring functional capacity.